Hi, I'm Jason Leahy, Executive Director of the Illinois Principals Association. Thanks for joining me for this IPA talk. And with me today, I'm fortunate to have Scott Bloomquist with me. So just right out of the gate, Scott, I want to say congratulations because currently you're Assistant Regional Superintendent, yes. ROE number 4 up in Winnebago, Boone County, correct?
Yes, sir.
But we're a day after the election, and you won the election to take over the regional soup spot starting July 1st in 2019. So congrats about that.
Thank you. Thank you. Very excited about that opportunity to help lead in our region.
Yeah, that's awesome. So good job and congratulations on that.
Thank you.
So beyond that, we're here to talk a little bit today about some pretty intense, important work that you've been doing around school safety, keeping schools safe, and this whole idea of threat assessments. Scott, I know that you and a colleague have studied this issue pretty closely and have come up with some protocols and procedures and other things that schools need to take into account on a lot of different levels with regards to doing a quality threat assessment if an issue were to arise. So if you wouldn't mind, let's just from a historical perspective, can you kind of walk me through what got you interested in doing this? Maybe share within that your background, because I know you haven't been a regional superintendent or an assistant, now soon to be a regional superintendent terribly long. You were a building level administrator, a district superintendent and such. So can you just talk me through what got you to this point on this important issue?
Yeah, like you said, I've had an opportunity to lead a lot of different positions within school districts. I like sharing when I get to meet with people. My very first job in the public school was a school bus driver, and moved from that through being a volunteer coach, substitute teacher, and I had an opportunity at the building level. And before I did this, was a district superintendent in Winnebago County.
Listen, if you can be a school bus driver, there's not much you can't do.
You can do it all. It was
for sure,
and it was a really rewarding experience, and I'm thankful that I had that opportunity to do that job. But what sent us down this road is when I was superintendent in the school district up north. We started having some different situations happening in our districts where students were reporting to administrators or school psychologists some things that were frightening that they were saying, and they weren't the traditional, we want to blow up a school, things that were posted on social media or things that were written on desks, just some disturbing thoughts that they were having and ideas of wanting to hurt themselves or hurt others. So like every school in the country and in our state, we were doing the best that we could with what we had, and then we were conducting interviews. But at the end of the day, we would come together as an admin team and with our social workers and psychologists and really be scratching our head wondering, man, did we do everything that we could? Do we really feel good about where we're going with this? And then you throw in the realization that suspensions and expulsions really don't eliminate any type of a threat. And in the world of Senate Bill 100, unless it's a rare situation, even if there is an extended suspension or an expulsion, these kids are coming back. So we were really left with a loss of, are we doing everything that we can to really thoroughly investigate and make the best decisions for our students, our staff, and our community? So that's what sent us on a road to start looking for help.
So talk to us then what you found, Scott, through your research. I remember you talking to me about some traveling that you did for training and different things like that. So talk to us about that journey.
Well, we started looking to see, was there any system that was in place that any school districts were using? There really was a system that took you from the beginning as to when are we going to implement any type of a threat assessment? How are we going to determine it? And for us, we wanted something that was going to be more black, white, and not gray anymore, so that every single time, every situation, no matter what, we would have some type of a list of that we weren't going to compromise of when we were going to initiate a threat assessment. What we found, and we're going on 2.5 years ago now that we went down this road, there wasn't a lot of resources out there. And what we ended up finding was there was a system up in the Pacific Northwest that was developed by a school district in the early 2000s called the Salem-Keizer system, that it was a best practice as identified by the U.S. Department of Education and the U.S. Secret Service. I knew that it was the best of the best and we needed more information. So that led down a road of trying to just a lot of phone calls and a lot of emails on who can train us, who's able to do it, and finally got down to the name of one of the guys that helped write it. And he came out of retirement to put a training together in Seattle, Washington, and then we took a team of 5 of us to Seattle, Washington to get our initial training.
So you did the training, you're bringing this back home now, right. Correct? Talk to us about, the process of implementing this. How did you basically onboard this within your district, Scott, get everybody up to speed? And if you wouldn't mind, share with us a little bit about, what you saw in the early going and actually utilizing the new tool and this whole idea of doing a quality threat assessment.
Right. The training that we got, what was, we spent an extra day just with our team while we were there to be able to go over what we had learned the day before.
So after the training, you're doing this, correct?
We did. We stayed.
Novel idea to actually talk about it after you actually do the PD. Good idea.
So we wanted to learn and what did we get out of it? And what the training was really good, but it was almost completely from the law enforcement perspective of things. Probably half of the crowd that was there were school resource officer, police officers. They had a forensic psychologist training you. And it was really good information, but what we left it was, how do we implement this? And how do we make it practical and take the information they gave us? How do we train our people locally? How do we take the forms that they gave you drafts of and make them our own and put it into practice? So we spent an entire day as a group kind of problem solving through that. My colleague on the plane ride home was knocking out forms, and I remember we were sitting on the plane ride home and wondering, now that we went through this, we'll probably never need it again, which would be great. Yeah. The reality was when we got off the plane, there was a voicemail that we had a threat that was made against a staff member that day while we were in flight. So we got to implement immediately when we came back. So what we've seen and what that district has seen in using it and implementing it is that, again, that first part about determining it, they have that list of, if any of these things happen, we're immediately implementing our teams.
Could you just rattle off what are those things? Like if these things happen?
Some of the main ones would be, if there was a direct threat that a student made against somebody, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to hurt you, I'm going to blow up the school, social media things, those things that you're most familiar with. Right. But there are some lower ones down there that would be if somebody reported that they just feel scared. That a teacher reports that I'm very uncomfortable and I feel scared and I don't know why. Yeah. So it could be very vague type things like that. If there's unresolved conflict between students, 2 students get in a fight and they've gone through counseling, they've gone through remediation or whatever, and there's still ongoing tension. So what we brought out of this is that, in assessing student threats, it isn't just about school shootings. We're really putting together a process that is helping us make the best decision on whether what a student says, does, prints, posts, writes about is a legitimate threat to the safety and security of themselves or others.
Yeah. So talk to me then. So you've identified a threat, and you know that you have to work with a student, probably the student's parents, the other individuals involved. So can you give us a bit of a picture, Scott, of what that looks like and how you're utilizing the tools that you now have created to help you with that? Right.
So the tools that are available is there's 4 different sets of interview questions. One for the potential student that made the threats, student witnesses, teachers, and parents. And what's great about those documents and those protocols is that it's scripted. They're prescribed questions. They align with what research has shown going on back on acts of school violence from the mid-'70s, even through current stuff that's come out through 2013 data, that is making sure you're targeting very specific questions to the characteristics and warning signs of potential acts of school violence. So it takes the guessing work out of what you're going to ask. So that is the first part of it, is being able to conduct those interviews in a consistent way, regardless of who is doing the interviews, knowing that you're always asking the right questions to get the right information from the people. Another really great part of it then is after those interviews are done, there is a level 1 protocol that you go through, which is 19 different questions that are helping you take all of the information that you got to evaluate and assess the information to make the best decisions and determine, is this really a legitimate threat? Then another part that we brought into our training that we do is the supervision and intervention plan. And then that is really holistic, from potential discipline through community wraparound support and everything in the middle of how we're going to support the student that is the potential assailant and the potential victims. Because again, for most of the time, these kids are going to be back in our schools, and we need to continue to provide support to them.
So when I've had an opportunity to look at some of the good work that you and your team have put together for this, Scott, there were a couple of things that struck me, and I guess I'll be curious about your reaction to see if this is correct. But when I think about this era that we're in, about being very, very sensitive to school safety and responding to the serious things like the school shootings that we've dealt with here in the past, but then also balancing that with the intent of legislation like SB 100, and how we make sure that for those kids that are maybe having difficulty with behavior, managing themselves appropriately, making sure that they get the services and things that they need. I mean, this work that you've done has really hit a lot of checks, checked off a lot of boxes here with regards to keeping schools safe, doing everything that's possible, to make sure that all threats are dealt with in an appropriate way. But on the other side of this, as you talk about the support services and things, really making sure that we're getting students that are maybe in trouble, and not just literally, but figuratively as well, be it with different things that they've got going on, but getting them the support that they need. It takes, as you mentioned, this holistic approach to things. Correct?
It does, and when we teach and we train other people on this in other districts, we hope that they get that picture. We call it before the crisis. And we do a lot in our state on training what to do during a crisis. Yeah. And we have our drills, and depending on how people with their lockdown drills and active shooter drills, and we have people in place on what to do after a crisis. But we really felt that there was a void in helping everybody become really consciously aware of what our role is as an educator, to help identify and become aware of what's going on and changes of behaviors of students before a crisis. And that's a big part of what our training is helping the administrators and the staff, social workers, psychologists that come to our trainings get an idea of, and again, those warning signs and those characteristics of students, those changes in behaviors.
It's like the de-escalation of a situation, right? I mean, it's trying to make sure that we're handling it appropriately, because I think sometimes when administrators are dealing with things that are feel a little bit out of control, maybe they haven't got the resources and the training that's needed, it's sometimes easy to amp those things up rather than bring those things down.
Right, and again, at the front line level of our teachers in the classroom, when we look at the research that's come out just in the last 6 months from the FBI, I talk about when we're seeing changes in behaviors in students, and you start stacking them on, and when we look at, again, being able to look back on active shooters and things that were going on in their lives, and you see that. They were having peer conflict, they're having parent conflict, changes in schools, they were having mental health issues or anger issues. There was just a lot of things that were stacking up against these kids. In and of themselves, one of those warning signs or characteristics doesn't mean a kid's a potential threat to hurt themselves or others. But when they start stacking up and you start seeing a lot of these things going on in lives, this kid is majorly at risk to hurt themselves or others. And the earlier that we can get our staff to recognize and report those types of changes in behaviors going on, the more proactive we can be to meet the needs of the students so that it doesn't get to a point of a crisis. Yeah,
well, what I really like about what you've spoken to or alluded to multiple times is making sure that we're not disenfranchising kids, right? Even when they're struggling and maybe making poor choices. One other thing I want to make sure that we touch on here, Scott, is just what I feel is an important element to this, and we don't always want to be about protecting our liability and the potential legal ramifications of these situations. But I think it's worth noting that the work that you've done here with the threat assessment and making sure that people follow the script to a bit and document and all the protocols that you put in place, what's left is a strong legal document that you've got available that can be evidence used if you're ever have to deal with this in a court of law per se.
Right.
I mean, I think that that's a very powerful element for schools to, be able to have some protection where liability is concerned.
Yeah, it's it's not the part of it when I was a superintendent that I liked talking about getting sued and things like that. But the reality is, we want to do everything legally defensible. When I say legally defensible, to me, that means that everything that we're doing, every I is dotted, every T is crossed, and it means that we're doing everything that we can to the best of our ability to do what's best for kids. Yeah. And whether it's curriculum or threat assessments and everything in between, that we want to do everything to the best of our ability. So when we started putting everything together and taking the resources and the documents that we got from Salem Kaiser and adding some of our own things to it, and then we put together all of it in a package, the first thing I did is called our district attorney, went and had dinner. He knew some of the situations we had, and we laid everything out in front of him. And our district attorney, at that point said, this is the first time I've seen anything that I could actually defend. And that was important to be able to know. And we do say that when districts want to implement it, the superintendents need to run this by their own legal counsel and then make sure that they're getting that same stamp of approval. But it takes the guesswork out of things. It doesn't matter if it's the frequent flyer to the principal's office or the school board president's kid. Mm-hmm. If any of these things are happening, we're going to make sure our kids are safe. We've seen the process. Parents that we thought were going to be not real thrilled that we're talking to them about these situations and could have been aggressive parents with us. As soon as they hear we do this for every kid, every time, no matter what, based on our criteria. And they feel calm that you're not just picking on my kid. You do this for everybody. Yeah, real sense of fairness there. It is. Scott Bloomquist, really appreciate you coming in. Where could people reach out to you or learn more information about this? I know you've been offering these administrator academies with IPA, but I'm sure people would like the ability to reach out to you personally if they've got any other questions. So where could they do that? Right. Well, they could email me at sbloomquist@roe4.org. Okay. They could also go to my own personal website, which is pdconsultants.us. And if you need any other contact information, be happy to get that to you. Absolutely. Well, we'll be sure to put that in the description for this video that we've got posted. But again, appreciate you coming in. Congratulations again on the election and being the future regional superintendent of schools up there in ROE number 4 for Winnebago and Boone County. So that's great stuff. Thanks again coming in. Again, my name is Jason Leahy, Executive Director for IPA with Scott Bloomquist, talking about the important issue of threat assessments. As always, if there's anything that IPA can do for you, don't hesitate to give us a call or check us out on the web at ilprinciples.org.